Let's kick off our session. Our first question is, what are the challenges, pivots, needs, and opportunities within the manufacturing, transportation, logistics, and warehousing sector? We heard this morning from Minister Fedeli that the province has seen an increase of 11,500 jobs since February 2020. The minister also mentioned that there's some additional support coming through electricity pricing for companies in this sector, which should be coming in January 2021. So everything seems to be rosy in manufacturing. It's all great, right? Do you agree? What are the challenges that you see still facing our manufacturing and logistics centers and logistics and transportation functions that are supporting them? Is there more that we could be doing to support these vital sectors in our economy? And in particular, what could we be doing in Eastern Ontario to help support any of the challenges that are seen in the sector? So I guess I'm going to send it over to you. Does anybody have anything that they want to talk about first of all? So Kathy, do you want to unmute Kathy so she can speak?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me? Sorry. Can you hear me okay? No. Okay. Hi, you can. I came from a background at Black & Decker Distribution Center. I worked there for almost 40 years until they relocated it, and I was in distribution, inventory control, shipping clerk. You know, I went up through the ranks. And when I was working, there were a lot of transportation options at that point in Brockville area. But now I've noticed that there are not quite as many. Is that a challenge for upcoming freight companies and manufacturers to get the product? Hear this echo.
So do we have any either transportation or manufacturers in on the session that would maybe want to be able to respond to that? I noticed, Dennis, I think you're from Wills. Is Wills finding that the case?
Actually, Rob, I'm with the Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade. So I'm here to kind of get some insight as to what's happening with the manufacturing sector in Leeds, Grenville. I'm new to the territory, so I'm listening with the intent of being able to become more informed.
Sorry, Dennis. I think it was Colin Goodfellow that I was thinking of. Colin, do you have any response to Kathy's question?
Sure. For Wills, anyway, we actually just sold off a portion of our transportation division back in May. It's a very competitive industry, as you may know, and we were struggling to kind of make a go of it. So we've switched completely to our commercial warehousing side. So I think we are seeing a consolidation in the transportation industry, where the bigger players are kind of eating up the smaller players, which provides less options for local manufacturers and local companies looking for transportation.
Right, and I believe Ken Davies is also in the transportation sector. Did you have anything to add, Ken? Can we unmute Ken? So Gord, can you unmute Ken Davies, please?
Oh, that's better. Thank you. No, I agree with Colin. There's one of the things with my business is I help Canadian companies ship into the United States. And it's actually the amount of business has increased over the last 6 months or so. And a part of that problem, I think, is the fact that a lot of businesses were running across the border themselves and picking goods up and bringing it back. Now, only commercial goods are being allowed to be shipped across, and that's increased business for some of us. And in response to Kathy's statement earlier in the program, we have a few new players in the area. Like, for example, we have a huge facility in Brockville for speedy transport, which seems to be doing quite well and is pretty busy.
Good. I'm looking to see, do we have any manufacturers that are maybe your customers? How are they reacting? Are they typically looking for new players to come along and give them a competitive quote, or are they sticking with the same old companies that they've been using forever? Okay. Any manufacturers in the group? I don't think I see any. Dennis, you said that you were new and you were here to help serve the manufacturing sector. What is the ministry seeing in terms of the manufacturing sector in the region?
Thanks, Rob. As I said, I'm relatively new and still kind of getting to know the. So I've been with the ministry for a little over a year and a half, working in east of Leeds, Grenville. So the counties of Stormont, Dundas, Glengarry, Prescott, Russell, and I've recently assumed the responsibility for Leeds, Grenville. But what I'm largely hearing from, and I operate predominantly in the manufacturing industrial space. And what I'm hearing from the clients that I'm working with is one of the biggest challenges that they're facing is actually human resources. And regardless of whether you're in Brockville or Prescott or in Winchester, similar problems relating to being able to find people at all levels, whether that be skilled, unskilled, in trades, professional. That seems to be one of the biggest challenges that businesses are facing. There are certainly others, including, early on broken supply chains and that kind of stuff. But resoundingly, I'd say human resources is the biggest issue.
And obviously, Minister Fedeli has shown that there's been an increase in employment, certainly in the manufacturing sector. Is there been an impact from COVID for making people available for this sector, or are they still struggling even with some people being laid off in that because of COVID?
It's interesting that in that particular case where hearing businesses to a certain extent recognizing that people need to be supported, and that CERB was well intended, but perhaps had some negative effects where I've had some conversations with employers who believe that CERB actually had a negative impact where people were not necessarily actively looking for employment if they were laid off because of the $2,000 a month that they were able to tap into. Some of that obviously is changing with the rules that the feds are putting into place. So hopefully we're going to see that turn around somewhat, and we'll have additional, a larger supply of the workforce because the jobs are there.
We're certainly seeing that in Brockville with some of the growth in the manufacturing sector, that there's a demand for skilled and unskilled labor. And as Anne pointed out in her presentation, there are some programs which the province and through our employment service and our college are looking to address some of those skill needs. But again, I think the demand for those types of programs is only going to increase, because I think our manufacturing employers are certainly going to be looking for a greater labor force and a greater contribution from the province in helping solve that issue. Dennis, did you want to have a comment? Or sorry, Ken Davies. Gord, can you unmute Ken?
Well, yeah, just wanted to follow up on that comment. We in the transportation sector, we've had a shortage of skilled drivers for quite a long time, and I think it's it's just getting worse rather than better. And I think something should be done to see about getting more people trained to be trained truck drivers, and possibly doing something about lowering the age of insurance companies insuring drivers. By the time an individual turns 25 and decides he wants to be a truck driver, he's already on his career path, and he's not going to go back and start working for a trucking company as a truck driver.
And skills shortage has certainly been an issue that we've heard in all these sectors, manufacturing and transport and logistics, for a number of years. And again, I guess the question to you, Ken, would have been, is COVID having an impact on your availability of drivers? Certainly it's impacting on the whole system, as you're having to, be careful about when you go into other jurisdictions. But what about the availability of labor?
Well, I think the answer to that is that a lot of the older drivers who have been hanging in there and staying on longer than they wanted to have decided that you know what, it's really just not worth it anymore. There's a lot of new programs out there. There's a lot of new information technology. It's not a matter of just hopping in a truck anymore and driving. There's so much more paperwork and electronic information being fed to and from the truck. More and more inspections of the vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. So I just find that a lot of the older drivers that were staying on past 65 are basically saying, tossing in the towel and saying, you know what, it's just time for me to stay home and stay safe.
Is there anyone else from the manufacturing sector who wanted to raise any of the other, what they see as key issues that are impacting on the sector? I know that certainly the electricity was one of the issues that manufacturers were continually talking to the province about, and clearly, as Minister Fedeli had mentioned this morning, that the province is looking at how they support that. Are there any other issues that were sort of infrastructure related? Okay. Yep, Ken?
Just one other thing I wanted to mention. I was involved with the program where we interviewed businesses and asked them about business intervention and business retention and expansion program. And a lot of the businesses that I interviewed were having difficulties finding good employees, and the other problem that they faced was, once they did find the employees, it was a matter of having them stay, because there was a number of people that we were discussing with, and they were saying that people would come out, they would start the job and they'd work a couple of days, and then basically either decide that they didn't want to work the next day, or they just, the job wasn't for them and they just decided they weren't coming back. And seems to be a lot of that going around these days, where the younger generation just they don't want to put in a full week's work. They want to work a couple of days. They want to get their paycheck, and then they want to party for a couple of days. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that was the comments that we got when we were going through the interview sessions.
Myself and Anne had been working with the employment agencies and the college around a program which Anne mentioned earlier called Skills Advance Ontario. And the intent of that program was to take individuals who were underemployed or unemployed and to put them through a training session. And that was one of the critical pieces of the whole component of the program, was to give those people experience in the workplace and what it's going to look like. And to avoid that, I've been hired on, but I don't understand what this is about. So part of the program was a placement of, I believe it was a week or 2 weeks, where they actually went and sat in an employer. They worked for them. They came back afterwards and the employer gave them feedback. But what was really important was it gave them an opportunity to see what the work environment was going to look like. And before they committed to it, they had an understanding of, how much they were going to have to lift and whether it was clean or dirty, or whether it was something they were going to be able to do. Could they handle going on a shift, which was maybe a 12-hour shift? So it was an important component of the program. But again, that program's taking on 50 people, so it's pretty limited in terms of how it's reach, but it's a start, and we've had an additional some funding for an additional 50. So we're hoping that through that program we can start to get a little bit of experience for some of those people who are looking for jobs. Colin, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just to echo on Ken's point and to your point, Rob, we've had a number of projects come on board in our warehouse locations in Brockville, in Ottawa, and Perth, which are actually COVID-related projects where we're offloading gloves and masks and PPE-related type materials. And we've really struggled finding that temporary labor. Exactly to Ken's point, we brought these people on and they'll be there one day and they won't show up the next day, or they'll leave halfway through their shift and we don't know if they're coming back. So it's been a huge struggle for us, especially during this COVID period, to find good labor, specifically temporary labor. So it's been a huge factor for us.
And when they're leaving, are you getting feedback on what it is that's, obviously if they walk out the door and they never come back, it's hard to get feedback, but is there anything that sort of says, well, it's just the work environment, or I can make more on CERB or anything like that?
I think the CERB factor plays into it. If they can kind of stay at home and collect as much or more money than they would be getting, through us, then there's no incentive for them to work. They can just stay home and collect that money. And so I think that's been a big factor, is the CERB payments.
Interesting. Ken? Can you unmute, Ken?
Sorry. Yeah, one of the businesses in the area, I had a little discussion with them, and they run a restaurant, so to speak. And they know of two cooks in their local community that basically could have worked for them, and they refused to work. They would rather stay home and collect the $2,000. I could understand it in the case of a young mother with a couple of young children who has to stay home and look after their kids, but that's certainly not the case with all of them.
Okay. So do we have any other issues that we wanted to talk about in terms of manufacturing and or transportation? What are some of the challenges that we're facing apart from the sort of skilled labor, which I think we've heard many times before, and some of the sort of competition and et cetera? Anybody else have any comments they wanted to? We've got a few more minutes left in the session.
Hi, Rob, it's Kathy. I am wondering what it's like for transportation doing border crossings back and forth. Is it, with the COVID, is it difficult for drivers to do what they need to do and do it safely? Or I'm surprised that that was even allowed, actually, although I do understand we need to keep the products coming through the border, but it just seems like it is a difficult job for drivers in a normal time of year other than during a pandemic. So I didn't know what the thoughts were on that.
Kathy, to answer your question, one of the people that I work with is a company by the name of Bay Brokerage, and we operate a fleet of trucks that go back and forth across the border every day. These days, most of the information is fed electronically via the border services and the trucks. It's made things a lot more professional. I find that basically only companies that are using qualified customs brokers are shipping commercial goods back and forth across the border. there were quite a number of individuals and companies that would, hop in their truck and drive across the border and pick up goods and bring them back and clear them themselves. And that's been sort of almost completely eliminated. I've heard of a few cases of some people getting through, but for the most part, the border's closed and only commercial goods are being shipped back and forth across. But the volume of those goods has increased because now you have companies in, for example, Brockville that are shipping goods across the border and the goods are then being put into FedEx or UPS or even USPS and being shipped across the country from there.
Okay. Colin, did you have anything to add to that, or is your experience through your drivers?
We don't have much cross-border activity. We have some, and to my knowledge, it really hasn't been a factor. As Ken mentioned, it's usually most of the clearance is done in advance. So I think just the overall, decrease in traffic has maybe helped our drivers get across. I really haven't heard it being an issue, and I think that just their familiarity with the border crossing people, that it hasn't impeded their progress.
Do they have to quarantine when they come back and forth? Ken?
I don't believe so, no.
Ken?
That's one of the issues. On the American side, you do not have to quarantine. So, for example, there were a lot of Canadian boaters that wanted there were a lot of Americans who had their boats on the Canadian side. And so they couldn't get their boat back across the border. So they would hire an American captain to come to Canada, pick up the boat, bring it back to the US. Once they've done that, they could come back across to Canada, pick up another boat and do that. I find our people in upstate New York, they really don't think that this is such a serious problem. The drivers don't seem to have the same type of cautiousness as our drivers do. They feel a lot safer. Whether that's right or whether it's wrong, I'm not here to judge. It's just the way things are.
Yeah. Well, everyone, it's 1:29. I'm going to close off this session. Thank you very much for all your time and for your contributions. And if you want to go to the general session and choose another one, please feel free to do so. Thank you. To kick off our session, our question is, what are the challenges, pivots, needs, and opportunities within the manufacturing, transportation, logistics, and warehousing sector? Earlier today, we heard Minister Fedeli say that the province had seen an increase of about 11,500 jobs since February 2020. The minister also mentioned the support for the electricity pricing that was coming for this manufacturing sector in 2021. Seems like manufacturing is doing really well. Everything's all rosy. Do you agree? What do you think are some of the challenges that we still face in manufacturing and the logistics sector functions that support it? And is there more that can be done to support these vital sectors in our economy, in particular in Eastern Ontario? So over to you. Does anybody have an opening comment? Okay, guys, you don't want to hear me talk all the time.
Mike here. I was talking to the guys at EMC, and they did a survey of about several thousand of the companies that work for them. And 1/3 of all of their manufacturing clients are actually increasing their number of employees. 1/3 are staying the same, and about 1/3 have had some reductions. From what I'm seeing is manufacturing is improving. The biggest problem I see is the ability to adopt Industry 4.0 technologies. There is a lack of understanding of how to implement these technologies. I think there's a opportunity to hopefully some consultant or some organization, some college or whatever, is to help companies adopt the latest technologies.
That's interesting, and certainly the issue around labor and labor force, we've seen and heard a lot about the challenges of the manufacturing sector in getting labor, both skilled and unskilled. Industry 4.0 is something that's been around, and I think certainly in North America we've talking about it for a little while. Yeah, interesting to hear that maybe there isn't as much of an adoption of Industry 4.0 as we would like to see. Who do you think should be stepping up to that? As in, who should be helping companies with that?
Lately, I've been trying to use the NRC's advanced manufacturing scientists. I've also been looking at some of the colleges like, I forget the name of the one, in Humber College in Toronto. A lot of them are saying, yes, we would like to help companies, but they do not have a systematic approach. And the other thing is Industry 4.0 is a collection of technologies, and it is not well understood. It's everything from digital technologies to additive manufacturing to sensors to everything. And as everybody knows, there's a productivity gap between Canada and the US that's been growing over the past 20, 30 years. And we really need to start helping these companies adopt the latest technologies. But more importantly is, I think as Rob has said, is there is a lack of qualified people to help these companies identify and adopt the latest technologies.
Do we have anybody from the education sector on? Be interesting to see what the education sector's response would be to that. I know that certainly in Brockville in Eastern Ontario, there's been a lot of talk around skilled trades, and obviously responding to Industry 4.0 is about some of the skilled technicians that can operate those. And so we understand that the college, St. Lawrence College in particular, is starting to do some skilled trades training. I'm not sure if what that component of that would include Industry 4.0. Does anyone else have anything that they wanted to raise in terms of some of the issues that might be facing some of our manufacturing or industry or logistics sectors?
Rob?
Yeah.
I don't see my my hand raised, so I just raised my hand. But a couple issues I'd like to bring up. When I was with Leeds and Grenville a year or so ago, we looked into tax-free zones. And if you think of Leeds and Grenville and the border crossings that we have, seen as not too far beyond our boundaries, but Ogdensburg and Thousand Islands, and the tax-free programs, and they have tax-free zones in the United States. It gets a little complicated, but I think at some time in the future, we need to take full advantage of those. Sarnia, Lambton has one that's approved, and there are a couple others in Ontario. But given our transportation system here, we got the 416, we got the 417s, we've got a port, we've got the crossings. I really think we need to take full advantage of that and make it as easy as possible for our manufacturers to get goods in and out and take full advantage of that. And I'll just add a second part to that is I'm a land use planner, and when I was with Leeds and Grenville a year or so ago, we were looking for a large piece of property for a transportation company, and it had to be near the 401 and near an exchange. When you start looking at even though we have a lot of exchanges on the 401, a lot of them there's been other development around the intersections that tend not to be compatible with transportation, industrial logistics. And I think for our future here, I'm talking, 20, 30, 40 years out, any municipality that has exchange with a 401, 416 in it should be put in their official plan as, industrial or future industrial or business park, something like that. It was a big problem. I was looking in this area around Prescott, Brockville, and it's amazing that, again, how our land is quickly used up by other uses. So in the future, I think the lands around those 401 and 416 interchanges will be like gold. So that's all I have at this point, Rob.
Jim, have you had any feedback from employers that say that they're looking for tax-free zones?
Not to this point, no. I looked into it for Ann last year. The county was looking at it, and I think it's still on our plate. We may be looking at it some more. But to answer the question, no, not at this point. The information that I got from Sarnia Lambton, I can't remember the other. There were two that had just Niagara Falls area just recently was approved in the last couple of years, and they're doing quite well there. I think it's something we should look into quite seriously.
Yeah. Does anyone else have anything they wanted to raise, either with respect to some of the issues we already talked about around Industry 4.0 or around tax-free zones or any other issues? I'm going to pick on you, Shannon, because I can see you're here. So what's happening with the SAO program, and tell us about how we're addressing some of the skilled needs for our employers.
Sure. So CSE, Keys, EEC, active throughout Leeds and Grenville, and St. Lawrence College. We're currently underway with our Pathways to Production program. So it was identified in the area that there was a skills gap, and we've seen manufacturing increase in the area, which is wonderful, and it's continuing to, especially we're seeing some volume hiring right now with respect to a variety of employers, 3M, CanArm, whatnot. And so in response to that, we have our Pathways to Production program. So it's a 4-week in-class group program that based on feedback from local employers. So we have a core group where we got the feedback from the employers with regard to what curriculum they would be interested in seeing us develop. And so we have developed a curriculum based on their needs, which looks at soft skills, essential skills, hard skills, industry endorsed certifications. We do some lean manufacturing. We will also continue to adapt the program as the cohorts go on. So the Employment and Education Center is currently just finishing up a cohort right now, and we have one coming up in January. And I know that we're working with getting Next Polymers on board. And for example, they said that overhead crane training might be something that they would be interested in. So we're really flexible, and we can adapt the program to meet the needs of the employers. But everybody coming out of the program is going to get some basic to intermediate math skills training. We work with Excel as well. And then, like I said, some industry endorsed certifications. Typically, you will see forklift, first aid, so on and so forth. But we've received some good feedback. This is our second year of doing this program. So we'll have 8 to 10 participants in our cohort in January, and then looking at full-time sustainable employment for those participants in the Prescott area, which is phenomenal. And then they get tracked for a year beyond that. So there's some financial supports that the employer gets for taking on the employee. And then we will provide retention supports for up to a year to assist with that transition into permanency.
Shannon, I'd be curious to loop back around maybe to Michael's comments around Industry 4.0. Clearly, you've had in manufacturers or employers who have been helping with the curriculum. Has Industry 4.0, and I realize it's a difficult concept to understand, but has that been part of their discussion, or is that something that they're maybe looking for in the future? Either I've stumped you or you've lost your bandwidth.
Hear me?
Yeah,
I think it's. Sorry, I didn't get most of that.
Sorry. Okay, so I was trying to loop back around to Industry 4.0, which Michael was talking about earlier. Have we had any of the employers talking about that, or they want to include it in the curriculum? Do they understand what it is? Okay, so we'll assume that the program that Shannon is running is through is going to help get people into employment. But it'd be interesting to find out whether from them at some point whether Industry 4.0 is a part of what they're trying to teach or train, or employers are even asking for. Any other questions or any other concerns about manufacturing in Eastern Ontario that we should be raising and talking about?
Mike here again. I'm dealing with a lot of clients because I'm working with the Industrial Research Assistance Program, and I have clients all the way from Deep River down to Brockville. And what I'm finding is finding skilled employees or technologists, like college graduates, has been very difficult to attract young people to communities outside of Ottawa and Toronto. I'm not sure how to guide these municipalities. One of the things I was finding with clients in Barry's Bay was, yes, they might be able to find people to help at Madawaska or St. Francis. It's then they were unable to find places for these employees to live. And I was suggesting to one of my colleagues at the municipal level is perhaps the municipality might try to make available living quarters for these employees, because number one, it's difficult for somebody to move to a place like Barry's Bay or Renfrew or whatever without the idea that they would actually have a place to stay. I do know some of my clients in the Renfrew area have their employees living in Ottawa and traveling every single day to Renfrew. And I suspect that after a year or two of doing this sort of travel, that they are going to lose those employees. And I don't see the municipality itself in terms of trying to create an environment that is attractive for young people to move to. Now, I don't know the municipalities have the budget or the interest to support that sort of thing, but it is something that is. We will eventually get 5G in places like Renfrew and Barry's Bay, etc. But if there's not a place for people to live and feel comfortable in, they won't stay there. So it's outside of maybe just finding in places, it's finding a place for them to stay and live. And that's a municipality issue.
Yes, and I know that the commissioner of the St. Lawrence Economic Corridor has been doing a lot of work in sort of looking to bring employers here. But one of the challenges he's faced is that just the housing shortage in the area means that even if you can get employers here and or having them grow here, attracting employees when the housing market is so tight is very difficult. And at one point he was, the board of the corridor includes all the mayors from 7 different municipalities. And he was raising it to them to say, what are you doing as mayors and as municipal leaders to make sure that we're meeting the demands and the needs of housing going forward. And I think most of the municipalities recognize that more needs to be done. It's a challenge in that housing. Whilst the municipalities have a role, it's generally private sector developers who are responsible for building those houses. So it's down to the municipality to make sure that there is a proper process to allow them to build. But ultimately, it's down to private companies who are going to build those. So it's a complex mix, but yes, it is a really key issue. And I don't think we've really necessarily even talked about or touched upon housing for people who are not necessarily buying a property, but maybe are looking to rent or looking for some low-cost housing. Anyone else have anything else they want to raise? I'm going to start centering people out. Jennifer Miller, how are things going in Smiths Falls?
Hi, Rob. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. Smiths Falls is good. Of course, the highlight of our manufacturing story is canopy growth, and their bottling plant came online last year, and they've just launched a new line of drinks. So they're quite busy. Tamco moved into our community this year. Every day is starting to merge together, but recently. And they're busy and they're doing a lot of hiring, which is great as well. So we did lose Metro Land, and so that property is for sale. And we're looking to try and fill that space. But our industrial park is busier than it's been in a decade, so we're really quite pleased.
What kind of feedback are you getting from your employers, your manufacturing employers, about the challenges that they're facing?
So, the challenge that they continue to face despite the pandemic is workforce development related, and it's hiring and retaining talent. So that's really what I'm hearing mostly.
Yeah.
That's not new or not unique to Smiths Falls right now.
And it's not new either. It's been an issue that we've been hearing for a very long time in both the manufacturing sector and in the previous session of this group. There were a number of logistics and transportation companies on, and they were saying exactly the same thing, particularly as their workforce ages and gets older and they want to get out of the industry. Finding drivers who are younger, who are still prepared to stay in it and stay for a long time is becoming a big challenge.
Yeah. And I think the life lesson for employers really is that we can't keep doing things the way we've always done them, because this new generation or generations, they don't stay in a place for 35 years and get the gold watch and set off into the sunset. So I think there's a shift employer-wise also to happen that we need to consider.
So I think year on year we hear the same thing from our manufacturing sector, which is skills and skills development and labor force issues are the big thing that they need some solutions with. And the program that Shannon had talked about was one that clearly we're implementing in a way to try to start to address that. But it looks like the demand is going to be certainly outstripping what that program can deliver. So hopefully with some success there, the province will see an interest in being able to continue it. I certainly know that St. Lawrence College was also putting in some skilled trades programming as well, which again, hopefully the employers in that in the area who are looking for skilled trades can actually start to use to address some of their issues.
Great.
Maureen Keeler, this is right up your alley. It's all skills development. Any comments on the manufacturing sector?
Well, I would say the sort of some of the feedback that we're getting, particularly through our summer consultations for our labor market report, basically there does seem to be a little bit of an uptick in manufacturing, notwithstanding what's going on with COVID and everything else. But it is one area that they are hiring. So that's a positive thing given what's going on. Although they are having trouble, to a point made earlier about particularly the plant in Gananoque, trying to find people that, first of all, that they can find, and second of all, that will stay. So I know Keys has done a number of job fairs there. So they're looking for people, but
were you getting any feedback about the CERB as having an impact on them in terms of getting and retaining people?
Yep, absolutely. CERB had a big impact because folks were making, well, to the presentation we saw earlier today, folks were making more money than they were when they were employed. So yeah, definitely getting that feedback that folks, and even now that CERB has ended, the revised EI is still attractive to some folks as opposed to going back to work. So yes, we're definitely getting that feedback, Rob.
And were these people that were in employment previously that are just choosing to not go back in? And is that what you're getting? Is that they I mean, CERB has been pretty wide ranging, but it was supporting people who were in employment. Are they choosing not to go back in?
It's a little bit of both, but definitely that's what it appears. So if Shannon was able to speak to us, she would definitely be able to give us a little bit more insight on that. But yeah, that's definitely the case. There she is. You know, folks that we're looking for. Okay, Shannon, I'll let you speak to this since you're here. Can you speak to us?
I think so.
Okay,
You let me know if I come in and out because it's a little still a bit patchy listening to all of you. But I
Maybe turn your video off.
would say there's a lot of different factors. I mean, oh, it looks like you guys are frozen. Can you hear me?
Can hear you.
We can hear you.
You can hear me?
Turn your video off. Turn your video off.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'll turn my video off. So I know. So definitely, we have definitely had clients take advantage, and I don't mean that negatively. I mean take advantage of CERB and now the CRB. I mean, and we completely understand. We're working with a lot of folks, especially in Prescott. We have a very high percentage of folks on Ontario Works that we see. We also work with a lot of folks on Ontario Disability Support Program, and quite frankly, it was just much closer to a living wage and what people really require to survive, and so it went without saying that those that either were just on social assistance or those that were working maybe part-time or even full-time but only at minimum wage, it was just more attractive to continue on with the CERB, and it was quite loose as to how you could apply and qualify for it, which definitely impacted employers. Their hands were a little bit tied, or still are a little bit tied in terms of what they can do to get people back. Because even if they're like, okay, well, you know, no more layoffs, we need people to come back. It is quite simple-ish for those employees to be like, okay, well, no, I can't come back because I find maybe the workplace unsafe, or I have children to take care of, or I'm in an immunocompromised situation, right? So we do have kind of that's definitely come into play. But at the same time, there's others, right? That there is just still legitimate downsizing or layoffs that are happening. On the other hand, we're seeing another bit of a shift too, especially in the Grenville area, a more affluent community. We're seeing those folks coming in with multiple BAs, you know, or much higher skilled, that are now also being forced into maybe career shifts or finding completely different jobs. That's a whole nother type of kind of population to be duping a job searching for. And with our Employment Ontario transformation, I'm not sure any of you would be aware of that, but with that coming up in the future, we're actually going to be tasked with serving the most vulnerable and those furthest removed from the labor market. So I'm curious to see these displaced workers with the kind of higher education and higher skill set, how we're actually going to be able to help them in this new kind of transformed Employment Ontario landscape. But hopefully I answered your question in some way.
I think you did, yes.
Okay.
And we're probably past our time now.
Okay.
But wanted to thank everybody for your contribution this afternoon. Thank you for participating in the summit, and we'll see you next year, hopefully in person, but if not, certainly virtually. Thank you very much, everyone.